Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. Today we are recording part two of the interview with Keith Herman. If you didn't catch part one, just throwing this out there, there's going to be a link in the show notes, so make sure you go back and check out part one because you're not going to want to miss it. I mean, we covered a bunch of stuff there in the entire first half of the book, if you will, so definitely want to check that out. For those, again, if you didn't catch part one, let me give you a little brief background on Keith's history and bio. So Keith is an entrepreneur and founder of IPA Equities. During his career, he's owned, scaled, and successfully exited more than 50 SMEs, including 10 startups across the sectors of technology, finance, media, and real estate. Throughout these businesses, he's raised more than $500 million and participated in more than $2 billion of transactions. I give you the longer version in part one of two, so go check that out if you want to hear the rest of it if you haven't yet. But other than that, Keith, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. So part one, we covered a whole lot. I'll tell you, my head was spinning the rest of the day. I'm thinking to myself about some of your stories and kind of reflecting back. We're talking about the rise and fall. You make it in real estate. What happened afterwards? All of these, we went through a lot yesterday, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm excited about today. So I want to start off today with getting into obviously, you've been through, even just with your background, so 200 businesses, you tech companies that you've worked with, I mean, all these other things. And out of all of these experiences you've had up to now, you choose this story with Tomas and Elena. Like, how did you go about kind of narrowing it down? Because it's a significant portion of the book. It's very well done. But I was thinking to myself, like, how the heck did he pick this story?
Good question. When I was planning out the book, my thought was that what I really want to convey to the reader is this idea of being successful as an entrepreneur. And my thought process was that I would like to share what my experience was and how I was able to do what I was able to do. And I wanted to use somebody that could be related to, that everybody knew. So that's why I talk about Michael Jordan. And then I thought to myself, who could I talk about that's another case that is not myself, not somebody that everybody knows, but just one of those people that you read about in the news every day. And that was, that was the best example that I could use that I had experience with, firsthand experience. So that for me, it was very easy to choose that story. I mean, there have been other stories, but that one was also very personal. It wasn't just a business transaction. It was a personal relationship. So I thought it was fitting.
Yeah, when I was reading it, it just had so much depth, as I mentioned in part one of this interview series, that it was not just an entrepreneur story; it was a love story. It had all these other facets in it. It had a struggle with Tomas trying to grow into this other person that he needed to ultimately be. You had in there his willingness to learn. I mean, all these other things. It was just such a dynamic story. I feel like when a lot of the readers go through this, there's going to be many things they could relate. First of all, I could relate to many of the things, like, and this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's right there in the table of contents. But the idea that somebody could, or I should say, the idea that when he comes to you with this shoebox and he says, Keith, I'm not a business person, like, I'm an inventor. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, geez, how many of us out there have maybe we start our first business, we get into this maybe over our head. I could say that was me, my first business for sure. I'm probably still in over my head. I'm still learning. I'm not saying I'm not, but and we don't necessarily know the importance of the business side of things, but we just have this idea, like this thing we want to bring to market or this thing that we want to see become a reality. What kind of advice or what kind of, words of wisdom, if you will, would you give to the people out there that are kind of in that position? So meaning they have this idea, they want to get it out, but they don't have the business side of things. Like they're just, they know they're lacking there. And, like Tomas coming to you with a shoebox full of papers, just say, hey, help me. Not everybody's going to have you on their journey to help them. What kind of advice would you give that person that's listening now?
Well, Adam, as you know, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and startups, so this is something that I address frequently. My advice is that whether you're an inventor or whether you're a developer, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever the case may be, you're a business person by default, plain and simple. So you can decide how much time do you want to be a business person or how much time do you want to spend focusing on the core of what you do. That being said, obviously, if you're a developer, you develop software or, develop something else, right? If you're a doctor, you see patients. If you're a lawyer, you see clients. So you really have to make a commitment that it's in your best interest to focus on that and work with somebody who has business experience so that they can take that off of your plate. And that's really the best advice that I can give. It's very difficult to do. It's easier said than done because, everybody wants to have control of what it is that they're doing. But certainly, when you start out, you don't have the time to do everything, but, you have to find the time and you have to get efficient at it. So you need to talk to people who have experience in that space. And then when you can afford, employ them or bring them in and take advantage of, their services to make your life easier.
And so this theme, it's woven throughout the book. So the beginning, the middle, the end of the book, the whole book really has this theme of destiny throughout. And I think one of the most interesting things about this story was really Tomas and his I don't know if I'd use the word resilience, but his just vision and his knowing and his belief that this was his destiny. Was basically to make a difference and to help a lot of people, even if as he put it, was in a small way. Can you talk a little bit more about how you feel kind of destiny played a role in the story?
Well, I think it's just as it does in everybody's story. Destiny, I think of synonymous with success. It's in order to reach that destiny, right, you have to be successful, right? So, my feeling is that, I think people genuinely know inside of them whether or not they're going to succeed or fail. They may have doubt, which everybody does, but deep down they know whether or not they're really meant to succeed at something. And I think that it's being able to focus on that and being able to clear away all the things that are standing in the way of you achieving what it is that you want is really the challenge.
Absolutely. And I don't know where I read it or who said it, but it wasn't me, that when most entrepreneurs, they fail, at the end of it or at the end of that journey, whatever that looks like, in a particular business, I should say, not fail in life, but in a business or something. And they say at the end, yeah, I kind of figured that wasn't going to work. Or they'll kind of admit that at the end of the journey. And it's and it happens over and over again. And so obviously I'm being in business for a while. I've met quite a few people that, they're at the end of that end of it, and whenever it is, whatever after the healing period or whatever, because it's hard to lose a business, it's hard to fail, not trying to glance over that. But at the very end, when they really have that gut check, they're I didn't think that was going to work.
Right. And the point is that it's okay, and those things happen. But, hopefully you learn from that experience, and it gets you closer to where it is that you're meant to go. But if you don't if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you can't win, right? If you don't get on the ship, you're never going to sail. You don't get on the plane, you're not going to fly. So, it's important to say, do I really want to do this? And if I'm going to do this, get on the ship or the plane or try to win the lottery, I got to take action, right? So I need to, go through a process to be able to, ultimately get to where it is that I want to go.
That's awesome. So I want to switch it up. Let's this chapter. So first off, and to the listener, we barely touched the story on Tomas and Elena. You're going to have to get the book to get that one. That was just a little teaser, but let me tell you, this story is well written. Number one, it reads really fast. Like, you're going to get caught up in it. You're not going to be able to put it down as soon as you start the story with Tomas and Elena. You'll have to finish it to see what happens next. But we didn't want to spoil it for you today, so I don't want to tell you what happens at the end, but you're going to be shocked. And when I read that last line, Keith, I was like, I had chills. I had a little bit of tear coming up. I had all those different emotions. I'm like, what the hell, Keith? What'd you do to me? I feel like I'm watching Netflix right now, and I just binged the whole season of something, and I got to the end, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect that. So awesome job on that story. And for everybody listening, hey, there's going to be the link in the show notes. Just go buy the book, and you're going to have to read that one for yourself. But for now, let's move on to the next one. So this was my favorite paragraph in the book, and I'm going to read this one verbatim, which I don't normally do, but this one just hit me because I was like, oh, man. And it's just the way it's written, I'm just like, yeah, this is the one. So it's in the chapter on mystic money, and we're going to talk a lot about alignment and Keith's view of that and what that looks like, but this is a paragraph that hit me. So there are always and always will be those who write off remarkable moments and achievements to chance because they are too busy or uninterested in understanding how others achieve success. However, for those who choose to inquire about other people's remarkable results and triumph, they are pleasantly surprised to glean the unique commonality of alignment. Almost all accounts of these feats include moments of effortlessness, a state of perfection frequently described as surreal or hypnotic, and that is precisely why these people cross the finish line, is because of this alignment or flow. Oh, man, Keith. So when I read that, I was like, I think probably right after that, I decided I need to schedule some time for deep thinking every single week in my own personal life and business, just to sit back and to really study and do exactly what you're talking about in this book. So that being said, first off, maybe just a little definition of alignment and I guess my first question is, are alignment and flow, are those words used interchangeably for you?
No, not at all. Flow is very often mistaken, and what I mean by that is the way I see flow described very often is this state of effortlessness where things are just happening, and everything is perfect. Well, very often that does happen, but you're not really aware of what's happening. And you may just be on autopilot, and you're just going through motions, but you're not really present. And then there's the case where you truly are present. That is real flow. When you are truly present of what's going on and you are experiencing each and every moment or, instant of what's happening, that is flow. So people say, oh, yeah, I'm in flow on this and that. And generally, it's not flow. Generally, it's autopilot. And there is a distinction between flow. Now, alignment, the way I describe it is it's, this linear progression. Flow is more of the process, where alignment is just getting things in order, to be able to make that journey to where it is that you're headed. But the flow is the actual process of getting there. So I don't look at it as alignment. I look at it as alignment as just getting everything in order. more simplistically, where the flow is actually the process.
So let's go a little bit further into alignment, because you really build that concept out in the book, and I thought it was definitely something that that entrepreneur, in my opinion, I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, this is something that should be you should strive for, right? We should strive for, and I don't know that one has to happen before the other. So I think everybody's going to be a little bit different on that, right? But I feel like without alignment, it may be a little bit more difficult to do to really achieve or to maximize whatever opportunity you're working on. So what kind of, and we're going to talk a little bit more about mapping and mastering your success next, and your plan that you have laid out. But just to give people a flavor of some of the components that are necessary for alignment, like what's some of that, what goes into that recipe?
Well, I provide those elements in the book. There's a handful of things that you need to have in order. Not necessarily a specific order, but it's pretty close to the order. There may be one or two things that may fall into, precede the other. It's generally those elements. Some of the things are, your desire, motivation, beliefs, your values. These are the things that you have to have them set up in a way to where you can execute on what it is that you're trying to do with the least amount of resistance. So if you think about the concept of an object moving and friction, the more friction that there is, the slower the object's going to be moving. So you want to get moving as quickly as possible, because 2/3 of all businesses fail, shortly after they're out of the gate, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, you want to make sure that you do things as quickly as possible. And to do that, you need to have things as aligned as well as you can. What you're going to find out as you move through, try to move forward to where your destination is, you're going to find sticking points and challenges that you need to overcome. And it's a matter of getting those in order to improve on your alignment. And if you think about it as your spine, as one of your vertebrae is out of place, you may have pain, you may not be able to stand up straight, you may not be able to move as easily. So you want to get all those vertebrae in line so that everything is in perfect order so that you can perform at your best.
No, that's awesome. And as I was reading through it, and especially what you're saying right now in terms of like how that speed is important, and especially because businesses fail many times out the gate and all these things, it all adds up to what gives you the best probability of is the business going to work. So I just like the way the book was laid out into that, and I want to spend some time. We're not going to go into, so everybody listening, there's like Keith lays out, there's 8 steps there, but let me read this line though, because I love this. I love when I read this, I was like, yeah, I knew Keith would not put something in the book that he did not believe in. So this made me laugh at the same time, and at the same time, I'm like, this is so Keith. And then it's just true. So to start off the chapter, mapping your mastering your success, you wrote, yes, many people are just looking for a quick fix with a few steps. But we can see from very successful people, real success requires considerably more than only a few steps and work. It requires mastering a process. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because sometimes because for the people that pick up this book, there's still a process you have to master. It's not saying just do these couple of steps and you're good. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I love that you put that in the book.
I put that in there because I felt that everybody is looking for an easy solution. And, I want to get to my destination quickly. I want to have a successful business overnight. And it's rarely the case. And if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be very dedicated and devoted to what you're doing. And that requires fortitude and really, being determined to reach where you're going. And I think that's really what sorts out people who are just, taking a stab at something versus people who are true entrepreneur. True entrepreneur, it's very hard to dissuade them from doing something. So, my thought process was that, it's important to share that so that people become realistic, have a realistic expectation that you have to do the work.
Can you talk about what because a lot of people use this word, and I think sometimes this is another misunderstood word. Can you talk about what you mean by requires mastering a process? So specifically the word process and what that means to you.
Sure. A process to me is how can I explain? In other words, let's say if you're doing a chemistry experiment, you have to follow the steps. Now, anybody can follow the steps in a chemistry experiment. And the reason why I mention this is because it reminds me of when I was in high school and did chemistry experiments, and they said, when you're done, the liquid in the beaker should be blue, and I would end up with yellow.
Same, by the way, same.
Right.
I'd end up spilling it personally. I'm like, I spilled it. Can I get another one?
Right. But then when I went to college, with the same analogy, when that would happen, what I understood is that there's a reason why it's yellow and not blue. And it's understanding what's going on behind it to be able to correct that result. So that process, it's more than just following steps. It's being able to make corrections as you go. And that's when I talk about the other elements, besides these steps. There's steps and then there's these other elements that you need to have. So the elements are all part of that process, and just following the directions alone are not going to really necessarily get you the result you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think one of the big takeaways for me from the book as I was reading that and kind of reflecting and thinking about, other things I've read in the past and everything else was that entrepreneurship, it's not a mystery. It's not like building a business, like all these other things. Like there's processes now, there's roadmaps, there's a lot of different things that can make a dream reality, but kind of thinking that you have to reinvent or create something. It can be an invention, it can be a different technology, it can be a lot of other things, but there's still processes that, whether it's scaling, whether it's bringing it to market, whether it's monetizing, there's still many other things out there that can help you make that dream a reality. Like, for example, in Tomas's case, when you gave him advice on multiple different stages of his development within his idea that were basically like he's going down the road, there's a fork in the road. Hey, Keith, which way should I go, right or left? Or even at one point when he's like, what do I do? I have no idea what to do. And I think you said in the book, I closed my eyes, I looked back in my head, and I was just relaxing for a moment, and then you let it out, and it was and there it was. I love that part, by the way, because I've seen you do it.
Yeah, more than a few times.
So relating back to the idea of process, and I want to stick on it a little bit longer, and the reason is because, again, I want some of that nuts and bolts for the listeners who think that this is a mystery. So one piece of advice that you gave me, I don't think in the past, and it may have even been through another friend, I don't know if you told me this directly, but I remember it being attributed to you, and this wasn't necessarily in the book, but it relates to process, is and it's saying that you don't really have a business if you can't sell it. And it's a different concept for some people, because especially if they're on their first business. And it took me some time to kind of get used to what that idea meant, because when you start your first business, and for the entrepreneurs out there that are starting their first one, that's like their baby. It's like, that they're creating it as their baby, like this, like nothing. You want no harm to come from it. You want nothing to happen. Obviously, you want to make money, all these other things. That's a given. But the idea of selling or parting or anything like that with the business just isn't. It's just not even like you can't even imagine it when you're starting the business. So can you talk a little bit more about that concept, because I do want to relate that back to process and kind of how you design and why you design, and bring that up when you kind of first start a business, because I think it's an important thing that weaves into this.
Yes, I do speak about that often, and I speak to I remember specifically being asked about this not that long ago, actually, and I believe it's in one of my videos where I talk about where I'm addressing startups who are pitching their businesses. And the reason why I make that comment is I think it's important for somebody who's starting out who really wants to build something of real value that they have a different mindset. And it's great to work all these years. People work 20, 30 years on a business, or they may even work 5 years on a very successful business. And, they've taken money out along the way, but then they decide that they're going to retire, or they're just going to close down their business. And then they've not taken advantage of the value that they've created. And it's a real shame, because I see this happen all the time, where people are very short-sighted, about all their efforts, and they walk away. Very often businesses will fail after many years because they didn't have the mindset that what they were doing was more than just creating income, but they were creating something of much greater value and something that would be worth something to somebody else. And if you can sell your business, then you really have something of value. It's a business that other people acknowledge. If it ends up just going away, then you weren't running it as a business. You were running it more as just a means of just paying your bills.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And I think on the operational side and everything else, it just changes things. So, for example, in Tomas's case, like, let's just say in theory, if he was starting that business as the inventor in the beginning and thought about it, like if he was designing that business to be sold, like, let's just say from the very beginning, there's no way he would have had a shoebox full of papers. He'd be like, nobody's going to buy a shoebox full of papers. Like, he's very intelligent, bright, amazing person. Right. So he's not, he's going to know, okay, I can't have a shoebox full of papers. Like, that's not going to sell. I wouldn't buy a shoebox full of papers.
Right. You have to take your business seriously, and you have to realize the value of your efforts. And if what you're trying to do is achieve a certain goal, why sabotage yourself? Why not take advantage of your hard work and maximize the return? And if that comes in the way of an exit, why not?
Awesome. So I want to go a little bit further into your process, and to the listeners, there's 8 different steps in here. We're not going to get into all of them. Again, I want you to pick up this book and go through them all diligently. There's places even to write in the book. It's just really well laid out and thought out in that manner. But I do want to pick 1 or 2, Keith. So in the 8 steps, one of the steps that you have there, one of the themes or concepts that you introduce is the term belief. Can you speak a little bit more about that in the context of the book?
Sure. Beliefs are very important. Why? Because people do all sorts of things based upon what they believe. If you, believe that, you're going to be a doctor, then chances are you're going to do what it is that you need to do to make that happen. And so your beliefs, are very, very powerful. People do all sorts of crazy things, believing things. I mean, we read about that in the news where people, they say they're delusional. It just goes to show you that people who, believe something that's absolutely absurd allow it to drive them in their life and do all sorts of things. And that's on the plus side, positive side, and the negative side. And so it's very important because somebody who really believes something, and this is really important, and I talk about it in different ways in the book, but it doesn't matter what everybody else believes. What it matters is what you believe. And that's very important because through the process of being an entrepreneur and building something, company or venture, whatever the case may be, it's important that you don't allow other people to, get in your way of you achieving what it is. And that's where your beliefs come in. If you really believe what you're doing is going to serve the greater good and be something that's very important, then you need to pursue that, regardless of what other people may think. And I talk about this in the book, about being around people that are not in alignment with you. Mm-hmm. That all goes to the beliefs. So beliefs are very, very powerful and a very important part of the process.
Yeah, that was a tough one in the book. And for anybody that's been through that scenario to where they're like, you don't want to cut people out of your life. You don't want to do this and that. But sometimes they kind of cut themselves out of the life. I think you say something along that lines in the book. And I was thinking back to my life, and I'm like, yeah, that does kind of happen. So I think it's going to be interesting when people go through that section and they kind of see your view, but of course relate it back to themselves too and reflect on how life's played out for them. They're gonna get that little smirk that you get when something you're like, yeah, we got on this one. I want to pull.
I was just going to say that I think that I try to provide examples so that it's very easy to see what it is that my experience has been, and hopefully it's very relatable, so that it's understood. And obviously everybody has their different thoughts, but you have to start somewhere with questioning or reflecting, and what it is that you can take from it, to become a more successful person.
All right, so I want to pull one more out of this, and again, there's a bunch of them. So you have values, plan, action. Of course, one of my favorites, destiny/success. I'm like, can't we just skip to 8 keys? How come it doesn't work like that? No, because you got to do the work, Adam. That's why. All right, I get it. So I do want to get into the idea of action, though, and what that means, because if I look through your the book and just your life, the way it's kind of laid out in the book, even in part 1 where we're talking, where you're giving more of your your history of when you first started and those first phone calls you were making and all those things that you were doing all along the line, and also Tomas's story. You think about the actions that he had to take and how it played out for him in the end, which is amazing. So tell us a little bit more about that action piece of your plan and mastering your success.
It's funny, you picked all the ones that I would not have picked as we go through. The action for me is pretty straightforward. I mean, you have to act on all the things that are driving you. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't act, it's not going to happen. And that in itself is a process. I talk about how, when you take action, you have to be observing what it is that you're doing. And, today, everybody talks about analytics. When I started, we didn't have analytics to be able to analyze everything that we're doing. But now there are tools available that help us with our actions that we take to see how efficient we are and what kind of results we're getting. So we live in a great time with regards to that. Obviously, it's become more competitive because of that. But it's critical that you take action on the plan that you create and monitor what it is that you're doing as you go along.
Awesome. And that's all we're going to cover out of your plan there, because I do want the readers to go pick this up. There's 8 steps there, and the way it's laid out, again, it really is a roadmap. So highly encourage you to go through this and go through it, and it's going to be like a reference that you can go back and listen to or read time and time again. So let's head on to next thing that it stuck out to me, and it was one of these things where I'm like, business books don't usually talk about this either, just like how you kind of weave the idea of destiny in, the idea of consciousness and what that means in your plan and the diagram that you have in the book. So I'm not going to even try to explain that over the air right now, because it's kind of hard to do, but the diagram that you gave, I'm like, whoa, speaking of biology or chemistry, you just created your own thing too. I'm like, this is awesome. Tell us a little bit more about consciousness as it relates to the book.
Sure. Consciousness very often it's synonymous with awareness, being aware of what it is that you're doing. Now, why is that important? As you decide that you're going to do anything, whether it's personal or whether it's something in business, you want to be aware of what it is that you're doing so that you can make adjustments to try to get the best result. And, very often, again, I mentioned this earlier, is we operate on autopilot and we're not really fully present and aware of what it is that we're doing. And so we're running on a treadmill, but we're really not getting anywhere. So it's important to be able to say, hey, I'm on a treadmill. I'm not really, on the street moving, heading towards the finish line. You need to be aware of what's going on around you and what's going on in the moment. And we haven't really discussed this, but it's also in the book, is that awareness or consciousness is very important as you go through this process and go through the steps, because through the process you're going to have a lot of internal things going on, things that you're going to deal with that have probably been roadblocks and other things that you've done, personal issues that are going to come up. And it's important to understand why things are standing in their way or why they're preventing you from getting you where it is that you need to be. So it doesn't require more thought. It actually requires more time just kind of being present and being able to receive information that's coming to you about how you're feeling and what's going on with you. So you can make adjustments that way, because very often we associate certain things with certain actions that we take, and very often that link is not accurate. So what I mean by that is maybe perhaps, I'm trying to think of an example, but very often let's say you were eating something, and at the time you were eating something that you loved, there was a terrible odor that overcame you. Maybe somebody was eating eggs or something, hard-boiled eggs, and you smelled the sulfur. And your favorite thing that you're eating, all of a sudden now you associate it with that smell. And, every time that you want to eat what it is that you love, you think of that, and it takes away from what it is that you're doing. So it is similar with a lot of things that we experience. We get this correlation between two things that's incorrect. So that's why being aware of what's going on, what actually happened? I used to love this food. Why is it I don't love it anymore? If you can go back and be aware of that incident, then you can say, okay, here's exactly what happened. That's ridiculous. My son, I'll give you another quick example. He got sick one time with the flu, and he ate Chinese food that night, and he got sick that night, and he attributed getting sick with the Chinese food. And he didn't eat Chinese food for like 10 years because he thought that he got sick from it, but it wasn't. He actually had gotten the flu. And we used to laugh about it because we would get Chinese food and he just wouldn't eat it. So, it's these things, you have to really be aware. And, that's what I talk about. That's the importance of that as you're trying to achieve what it is, just being more aware of what you're doing and what's happening.
And it seems to me like on the business side of things, it could be like, and you mentioned this a little bit ago about how now we have testing and now we have analytics and now we have other things, is that it almost seems like it's in your that your business can have its own consciousness too in relation to technology, just meaning to what input you get and what output you're getting in terms of a result. Am I off on that, or I just want to make sure I'm applying this to business too? So I know for my business, just to be honest, I mean, one of my favorite things about interviewing authors that are successful is I'm like, hey, give me some more advice, Keith. Come on.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, look, the greatest things, if you look at the greatest companies that are in existence now, and when I talk about now, things are much different now because of technology. When you look at the greatest companies that are in existence now, they've grown because they're greater than the person who developed them, because other people have contributed and made contributions, and those contributions have been accepted, most of the time graciously, and allowed them to grow and do, become beneficial to a lot of people and change people's lives. So you're absolutely correct.
Let's move on to point of view, because I think this is one that I know I've struggled with, and it's because I am I don't know, maybe it's a tourist thing for the astrologyzone.com, the astrologyzone.com. If you're listening to this, maybe it's that part. I don't know, but as an entrepreneur or just a bullheaded person, I don't know. You get stuck in your way. You get stuck in, this is what I see. This is it, and then somebody presents a different. You gave me one maybe a month ago. You gave me a different point of view that I'm still chewing on. That I'm like, but it's key. So I have to listen to this. Like, there's some stuff. There's something here. So tell us a little bit more about point of views and why that's so important. Because it seems to me like you even had that early in your career. Considering as the book played out, I should say, it seemed like you even had it early in your career. You're willing to accept different points of view.
Yeah, because if you want to be successful, you have to consider, that that if you're not getting the result that you want, perhaps what you're doing is not the right thing. So there have to be other possibilities.
Let's say that again. Hold on. I don't want to glance over that, Keith. If you're not, because that's like what you just said, that could be an entire book in itself, just one line, read it, and just keep reading that sentence again and again so that you know that it's time to change something. If you're not, say that again. How'd you say? If you're not getting the result that you want, say that again.
If you're not getting the results that you want, you need to consider that there are other possibilities to get you to where it is that you need to go. You need to be able to pivot. And in order to be able to pivot, you have to have options. If you don't have options, then you're stuck. So you need more. The more possibilities there are, the more options you have, and hopefully out of those options, you're going to find what works best. Now, to a lot of people, and I'd say many people, that's a very scary proposition because, now all of a sudden you put them in the ocean versus a lake, and it's overwhelming to them. But it's actually a good thing having all those potential possibilities. It's a question of finding the one that you need. And, the great achievements are needles in a haystack, but there's, plenty of haystacks out there, and, you need those possibilities. So it's important to keep an open mind.
Yeah, and I see that even in the book. So when you went to, when you ran out of options, as you said, and I believe that's the word in the book, and you said that you went to the bookstore. You're like, I'm out of options. I don't know what else to do. I have to go get some ideas, or I have to go learn something and tool up. You didn't use those words; those are mine. But it seems like you were searching for different points of view.
Absolutely, because I think I said it in the book is. I didn't know what else to do. It was my last resort. So, that was, while it was my last resort, it was a good last resort because, at that time we didn't have the internet, but, a bookstore had countless ideas in it. It was just a question of finding what I needed in there.
So what is next? The book's out. I know it's getting a lot of attention. I know this is. I know you're going to keep on going. I know you're going to promote this book. You're doing a bunch of interviews. But what's next for Keith Herman on this path and with this book? So what do you have next on the agenda?
Well, I'm working on a particular business. I've been involved in different businesses before. There's one particular area that I think there's still quite a bit of potential, especially in light of what's going on currently with our environment and the health situation that we have at this time. And I think that it's there's an opportunity to take a business and to grow it and take advantage of just the opportunities because of the environment we are. It's a business that is that traditionally was not run as a decentralized business, meaning where people are all over. Basically, people were more centralized in an office, so it's suited to be decentralized. There's an opportunity to put a lot of people back to work who are out of work at the moment. And it's helping companies. That is something that I've been doing for, quite a long time, and will in turn, directly and indirectly help a lot of other people, hopefully get back to work and be able to do some great things. So I'm working on that. I also have another book in the works that I wouldn't say necessarily it's a follow-up. I guess people say it's a follow-up, but I'm not trying to replicate things here. I'm just trying to share information and things that I feel that will be helpful to other people who are interested in developing a business or even just a personal goal. If it's helpful that way, it's rewarding to me. But basically, just share information that I think will help people live a happier life.
That's awesome. So final question, Keith, and may sound like a loaded question, I know, but I asked the authors it because this is kind of like the last words here. What is, if you had just one thing that some of those new entrepreneurs or even more experienced entrepreneurs that picked up this book can take away? And I know there's hundreds and hundreds of things. It's not a big book. It's a good sized book, 180 or so pages, very well written. If there's one takeaway that you're like, I hope that they get this particular message, what would that be? I know it's a hard one. It's an impossible question. There's no right or wrong. It's the worst way to end an interview, but it's what I like to do to my authors. You see what I do to my podcasters, Keith. For them, I make them pick an episode. I say, what's your favorite episode you've ever recorded?
No, I actually can answer this because there's one thing that comes to mind, and I think it's probably the most important thing, is you need to be open to change in order for there to be transformation. And that's really, you have to be open. If you're open and you're willing to receive other ideas, I think that, that is, the one thing that I think people need to understand. You can't, look, Adam, you mentioned earlier you're a Taurus and you're waves. But how does that suit you oftentimes? Right?
It sucks oftentimes. It sucks.
Right. And so really it's just a question of saying, look, I'm going to be open-minded. I'm going to be open-minded because if I really want change to happen, I need to be able to consider other things. And I think, being flexible and be willing to listen to other people. Look, you're not going to agree with the majority of the things that you hear, but it doesn't hurt to listen. And I think that, it's important to be open to change and transformation if you really want to achieve, success, whether in business or personally. You have to be open to change.
Love it. So just to repeat, so you need to be open to change in order for there to be transformation. Very well said, Keith. And it has been a pleasure and an honor to help bring this new book. So Disruption Out of a Box, an Entrepreneur's Guide to Success. So it's an honor to bring this first book out and to bring it to my audience, and everybody listening definitely wants you to go pick up a copy of this. The link will be in the show notes below. So definitely go pick up a copy on Amazon. Keith, if somebody wants to follow up and learn more about your businesses or anything else that you're doing, what's the best way for them to connect with your overall brand?
Yes, the easiest way is to just go to keithherman.com. There's a contact tab, and they can send me a message there. That's the easiest way, keithherman.com. And just, contact me there, and you have an opportunity to leave a message, what it's regarding, what it is that you're needed. I also am very active on LinkedIn, and that's always a good place to contact me as well.
And I know you do a bit of speaking and quite a bit of speaking, and I know right now we're not doing quite as much traveling with what's going on, but when as that all opens up, I mean, what are some of those topics and things that typically people reach out to you to speak and to head conferences for?
Sure. So I speak very often on disruption and innovation and technologies. And it's something that I've had a lot of experience with on the tech side. So blockchain technology is very often something that they ask me to talk about, how it's transforming industries and what's going on in that space. And I also speak on business growth. And what's essentially in this book is what I'm asked to speak on, to companies. They want to understand what the process is and how to get people on board and empower them. So empowerment, I think it's, more empowerment. I'm not the guy who's dancing on stage and carrying on like Tony Robbins. So I'm a little more dry than he is. But it's about empowering people and getting them on the same page so that they want to come to work. They want to do what it is that they're doing, and how to get better results out of them. So through knowledge is power. So it's basically being able to fill them in on how to improve upon what it is that they're doing. So those are the main things that I speak on. There are other things, like I said, through technologies that I've spoken on, like AI and 5G and virtual reality, augmented reality. But it's mostly disruption and innovation, which is more the overarching, umbrella for all of those things.
Fantastic. Well, and you can see a lot of that stuff over on KeithHerman.com, and so we'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes. So all good stuff there. Well, Keith, definitely pleasure having you on the show. So thanks again for coming on, and to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes Store, and if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments on the video. I'd love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Keith, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and I hope that your audience enjoys the book as much as you did.
Final words here. So you need to be open to change in order for there to be transformation. We'll end on that. Thanks again, Keith.